Hey there, everybody. PT Pop here. All four lobes of my brain securely bound behind my back. And I was thinking tonight about all the people I've met in my life who profess to be artists. And over the years, I've been kind of on this quest to find out what it means. What does it mean exactly to be an artist? And I made a documentary to try to show people what it was to be an artist. And in some ways in that film, I did define what it is to be an artist, and that it's never too late to be an artist. You don't have to be a kid to be an artist. You don't have to be, in college studying from some lofty Ivy League school to learn to be an artist. You can start at any age, you can be any race, you can be anything you want to be and still be an artist. And I asked this question because I've been on this quest all my life, trying to figure out what it is to be an artist. I sat around thinking to myself, what does it mean to be an artist? And when I was really young, when I first went to college, I thought it meant that you had to get a loft studio in some warehouse district in a city somewhere where you had a big cavernous studio with, 15-foot ceilings and floor-to-ceiling industrial windows with a concrete floor. I thought being an artist meant that you would sit in contemplation in the shadows of your studio, thinking of your next masterpiece. I thought it meant that you dressed exotically with purple hair, wearing a black beret, piercings through your nose, wearing all black all the time, black turtlenecks and black pants and leather, and you go to exotic wild raves and kinky fetish parties and hang out with people in the leather scene and smoke black cigarettes or brown cigarettes. And I always thought that once you had obtained the status in the art community where you're hanging out with those kind of people and sitting around contemplating the meaning of life and reading into the meanings behind each other's paintings in some dark room filled with the scent of incense and lava lamps and things like that, I thought that meant you become an artist. And then I thought, well, maybe you're not an artist. Maybe if you've achieved all that, you're still not an artist. Maybe you don't become an artist until you've sold your work, until you've had some type of appeal to the public where they go, wow, I like this person's stuff. I've got to buy it. And it's taken a lot of time for me to sit down and think this through. And it's not really any of those things. There's a lot of people I know who profess to be artists who have purple hair. They have piercings. They have tattoos galore. I've met musicians, writers, poets, painters, sculptors. I've met people in all walks of life, in all forms of the arts, fine arts, TV, movies, photography, everything. I met all kinds of people all across the country, both in person and on the internet. And many of these people lack something. And it's something that I just discovered for myself. And I believe the thing that we're missing, most of us are missing, is the ability to craft your work to a point where you have intent behind your work, that there's intention behind your work. When you sit down at your canvas, and I'm using that metaphorically, to create, whether it's through a digital viewfinder, or it's at a computer screen, or it's at a literal canvas, or it's at a potter's wheel, or you're writing a script, whatever your canvas happens to be, if you sit down at that canvas and you don't have intention behind what you're doing, I don't believe you're an artist. I'm not putting anybody down. I'm not judging anyone. I'm speaking from experience. I used to sit down with a guitar and I'd write a song. At least I thought it was a song. Then I met this guy many years ago, probably 25 years ago, a guy named James, who I'm forever indebted to because of some things he showed me about music. And I don't know if this guy's even still alive. But James, if you're out there, I don't even know if this is your real name, because he was a musician and I think he played guitar under a pseudonym. James, I'm indebted to you. And we ended on bad terms. And if you're out there, I owe you an apology. He's one person in my life that I owe an apology to. But that being said, this man sat down with me and said, I like your songs, man. You got great melodies, you got great ideas behind it, but there's no structure to your songs. And I said, what? How dare you? No? What do you mean there's no structure to my songs? I got all haughty and offended by the man's insinuation that I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, my whole time, and I started writing songs like 1990, 1991. And I wrote this song called Still Young. And it was like a jazzy number. And it was like a jazzy number that I wrote to mock my mother's songs, my mother's music. My mother listened to, now, if my mother was alive, she'd probably say, I never said I listened to that kind of music, but she listened to the crooners, big band. She said that was real music, okay? Sinatra. She wasn't a Sinatra fan, but Sinatra, Benny Goodman, Glenn Miller. I can't think of the crooners from the era other than Sinatra. But she knew good singers. She knew good music. She had a good ear and an eye for art. And I came out in the living room to play the song that I'd written for her. And she started to cry. And I had never performed in front of anybody before. I'd never played the guitar in front of people. I wrote this song called Still Young. It was meant to mock her music. It was a ballady, big bandy number. And she started crying. I stopped halfway through the song and I said, is it that bad? Is that why you're crying? And she's like, it's beautiful. I didn't know you could sing like that. And I sat back and I thought I had something. I thought if I could impress my mother, who was a huge critic and an art snob, damn, I must have something. I must know how to write songs. And my influence at the time were the Beatles. And now the story behind the Beatles is these guys just rolled out of bed, right? They rolled out of bed, bumped into each other in grade school, except for Ringo. And they just magically started writing hundreds and hundreds of songs, and they just could toss them off like they were eating cotton candy. So I figured I must have something. And if I can sit down and write a song that my mother likes, and I did it as easy as what John, Paul, George, and Ringo did, I must have something. But this guy, James, sat down with me. He said, hey, look, your songs are really nice. I like them. I want to jam with you. This guy was really talented, very brilliant musician. He was older than me, and I was intimidated by him because he was so far advanced from where I was at the time. And I knew I was far behind him. But he said, your songs don't have any structure. Your traditional songs go, there's the ABA format or AABA, verse, chorus, verse, or verse, chorus, bridge, so on and so forth. And he said, all pop songs are written like an 8-bar verse, 4-bar chorus, an 8-bar bridge or 4-bar bridge, things like that. I'm like, what are you talking about? I mean, I knew music. I had studied music when I was a kid, and I knew how to read music. But when I wrote my songs, I would just sit down and come up with a melody, just some chords, and I'd come up with some words, and I'd do it. I'll sit down and just do it, on the fly. I figured that was a song. I didn't think, well, a verse has to be 8 bars. It starts on 1 and ends on 4, a bar, 4 and 4/4 time. And James sat down and said to me, your traditional songs are structured in 4/4 time or 3/4 time, either one of those two time signatures. And he said, basically, they're a 4/4 time because pop music is meant for the masses. And it's meant because it's simple and it's easy to follow along. And your average person is dumb as a box of rocks, and they can't follow anything more complex than 4/4, 3/4, 6/8, things like that. And what he was saying to me startled me. I had never thought about it. I thought I was a musician. I thought I was a songwriter. I thought, hey, I've got these melodies and these lyrics. People tell me they like them. I'd play them out in coffee shops, and people would come up to me and say, I really like your music. So I figured I was a musician. But there was no intent behind my music. There was no structure to it. I happened to toss off some pretty melodies and a couple of pretty words and put them together and play on a coffee shop, and people came up and bought my cassette tape at the time. But James informed me that my songs were structured. And if you want to be successful in the music world, you've got to have some structure behind your songs, because no recording companies are going to they're not going to sit down with you and restructure your songs so they make sense to the record company and make sense to the public. And that sent me into a tailspin in a way, but it helped me, and it made me start to think about what I was doing. And it took me years to get over the resentment and get over myself from the criticism I got from my friend. And I woke up one day and I went, oh, I listened to my songs, and they didn't have any traditional patterns, and it drove me crazy. And he knew it. He knew I had a hard time keeping count, because I just figured I was doing it. I figured I was keeping count. And there's a term for what I did. My producer, Robert Carruthers, told there's a name for it. And it's something that J.J. Cale did. You just write stuff. You write it and you play it the way you feel it, instead of through structure. And it's perfectly fine. But there was no intent behind what I did. The verses were different rhythms, and the melody changed every time I played it. There was no structure to anything I did. There was some structure. Don't get me wrong. They were nice songs and they're pretty songs. But I think my friend James pointed something out to me many years ago. This is a good 25, almost 30 years ago, that there was no intent to my work. And when I say intent, I mean, when you sit down to your canvas and you think to yourself, okay, I'm going to make this creation. What do I want it to be? And what do I want it to say? How do I want to structure it? What colors am I going to use? What words am I going to use? What music am I going to use? What kind of clay? What kind of glaze am I going to put on the clay? What do I want the final product to look like? Yeah, I've got an idea in my head. How do I get from the idea in my head to make it appear in the real world? Now, I do this with my paintings now. Before, I would do a painting, and I would just throw it down the canvas. And I get frustrated. I get mad. I get angry, because what I was producing didn't look anything like I wanted it to look. It didn't look like anything I wanted it to look like. And I get so angry, but I had this one cityscape I did. My friend Laura went to New York City with her husband. She took a picture of the skyline in New York City from like the balcony of their hotel. And it was a fascinating picture. I said, wow, that'd be an amazing painting. But there before me in this photograph were probably 30, 40 skyscrapers, including the new tower that took the place of the World WTC, of all colors and shapes and sizes and different size windows. And I'm like, wow, this is fascinating. And then I put it, I drew it on the canvas, and I went, oh shit, now what do I do? And it occurred to me at that moment while I was doing this painting that I had to meticulously go through every little piece of this painting to get it to look the way I wanted it to look in that picture. And I started and I rushed through it, and I got frustrated and I got angry, and I just tossed it off. And I hate this painting. I hate this painting to this day. And I kept it. I hung it on the wall above my toilet in our half bathroom, where I do my business more often than not during the day. And every time I was doing a number 2 or a number 1, as boys do, stand at attention and pee, I would have to stare at this painting. And I looked at it and I said, shit, if you'd just taken your time with this damn painting, you could have done so much better. I had no intent. I had no purpose beyond the painting. I had no patience. My point is, when you know that what you're doing has intention behind it, when you sit down and you go, okay, I'm going to do this painting. I've got a new painting I'm doing now of a beautiful woman from Los Angeles. She's a writer, director, and an actress from Hollywood. I don't know her personally. We've, quote, met, unquote, on Instagram and Facebook, stuff like that. Her name's Jean Marie Spacuzza. And she has this picture of her standing in front of a railway system called Angel's Flight Railway. And it's just a little like rail car that goes up and down this hill in Los Angeles. It's a tourist attraction. She's standing, and this woman dresses in period dress from the 40s, I think the 30s and the 40s. It's an amazing photograph. It's just a very, it speaks to me. It looks to me much like an Edward Hopper painting. And I said, wow, I've got to paint this painting. And I knew that in order for me to pull this painting off, that it was going to take meticulous study of the work. Number one, because as a painter, I am not that skilled yet at it. I have some skill at it, but I've never really honed my craft. I never worked at it. And so over the last 3 weeks since I embarked on this project, I have meticulously sat down and taken this picture apart. She sent me the photograph through Instagram, and I have meticulously sketched and resketched and sketched and resketched and drawn it on sketch pads and big and little. I have broken down her face and her body and tried to figure out how her hands are being held, because she's standing in a pose where she's holding a purse under her arm and she's wearing these wrist-length leather, tight little like driving gloves. And it's a very casual but very kind of elegant pose. And I wanted to pull this painting off, but I knew if I had to put intention behind what I was doing. I had to meticulously sit down and study the different parts of the painting to get it right, because in my mind, I wanted this painting to be meticulous, to be great, to be strong, to be powerful. Now, will it be that? I don't know. I have no idea how it's going to turn out. But all I know is that the intent is there. I have already started the process of breaking down the picture, breaking down the subject matter, figuring out the composition, figuring out the color schemes I'm going to do, figuring out, like in the picture, she's standing against a faded maroon building, which in reality I think is actually orange. But in this picture she sent me, it's faded maroon. She's wearing like a deep maroon dress, and concrete she's standing on is gray. And so I've looked through this whole thing. The sky behind her in the distance is a very faded, pale blue. Just the lightest hint of blue. It's kind of a hazy day. And I said, well, what color scheme do I want to use here? Right now, it's just red and blue. There's no green, there's no yellow, there's nothing else in this composition. If I want to make it look like a Hopper, he did a lot of earth tones. He did a lot of tones and shades, and he did tones of colors. He didn't do a lot of bright things. A lot of his work was kind of muted tones, I should say. And I said, well, I got to change the color scheme. And so I'm going to change her dress to green. I'm going to make the concrete in front of her have a little bit of fainted like yellow in it, and put some yellow on the columns that are behind her. So it's going to be a red, blue, yellow color scheme, just a primary color scheme. And I have sat down with my palette. I've sat down with my palette knife and my paints, and I have pre-mixed colors to try to determine what colors are going to be on this canvas. How am I going to paint the columns? How am I going to get the right shades and tones and for her dress, or for the concrete, and for the sky? I have done several large sketches already by hand. Some of them I trace with a projector I've done a whole bunch of different things. And I haven't even begun the final one yet. I've even decided I'm not going to paint it on canvas. I'm going to paint it on gesso board, because gesso board, I think, is going to give me more of an ability and a freedom to draw and paint smoother than on canvas. I have a hard time with canvas because you've got to cover the canvas with several layers of gesso to try to get rid of that texture of the canvas. And to me, there's a long, arduous process, and it's a pain. And I have never, ever gotten rid of all the texture of the canvas, unless you want to put like 20 coats of paint on that thing. So my point to that is not to tell you about this great painting I'm making. Is to tell you that I sat down with a process behind it and an intent where I had an idea, and this is how I'm going to go from the idea to the final project. It's the same thing with music. It's the same thing with writing. It's the same thing with making a film. Now, my first documentary, The Artist, I had this idea that I just wanted to make a documentary. Now, I was going to go to college. I had been accepted to the master's program of documentary filmmaking at Ohio University in 2020. Now, we all know what happened around 2020. The nasty wasty bug hit. And my college didn't know if we were going to have online classes. They didn't know if we were going to have in-person classes. And I was on the brink of signing a lease to live in this crappy apartment off campus at Ohio University. If you know anything about Ohio University, most of the living conditions down there are pretty bad, especially if you're in the graduate program. And I canceled. They had offered it to me. I had accepted it. But when I saw the condition of the world and this nasty wasty bug, I politely rescinded my offer. And I made it a mission. I made it my mission to learn documentary filmmaking on my own. So that whole 2020 and 2021, I worked in my first documentary. I called up my friend Logan Rogers, who's now the mayor of Tip City. I called him up. He's an artist. He went to OU with me. He studied art as well. I said, hey, do you want to make a documentary about the life of an artist? What is it like to be an artist? He said, sure, come on down. So I ran down there with a guy named Eric McGuinn, who I had hired to be my cinematographer and my sound guy. And we ran down. We did a couple of days of shooting down there. And I had no idea what I was doing. I just jumped in with both feet. I didn't know what my intent was. I didn't know what my idea was. I just wanted to make a documentary about artists. And it just so happened, I just happened to stumble into it. And I ended up finishing it. I have to finish it on my own because Eric had got hired by a company in Cincinnati, had to move. And I just finished it off myself. I did most of the cinematography and I did all the editing and the sound. I wrote music for it. I did all of it. All of it. Cost a lot of money. And I ended up winning a couple of awards for best documentary for it. But my point is, it really didn't have any intent. It didn't have any intention. It didn't have any structure. It didn't have a vision. I didn't have anything there. I was lucky that it ended up being halfway decent. If you want to watch it, it's on YouTube free, called The Artist, a Documentary. But that leads me to, how do you know if you're an artist? And it is, of my opinion, this is just my opinion. This is not based off of some college professor or some, pie in the sky guy that's got a throne somewhere that talks about being an artist. Because a lot of these professors at the college level that teach art are full of themselves. And I don't think they've picked up a paintbrush in their life, or they haven't done it since high school. I think you become an artist. It's not when you sell your first painting. It's not when you have a studio. It's not when you attend your first kinky, freaky fetish party or go to your first rave and drop acid. It's not when you get your first tattoo and decide to dye your hair to, protest your parents' authoritarian grasp on your balls. It's when you actually have intent behind your work. It's when you put in the time and the dedication and the structure and the thought behind what you're going to do with that piece of work you're working on, regardless of whether it's a painting or a script or a movie or photograph. And I wanted to make this to all of you because there's a lot of people I know that just sit down and throw crap on a canvas, but they don't have an intention behind it. Now, I don't mean crap as in it doesn't look good. There's some people that make some really bizarre looking stuff that I think is amazing, but they put all kinds of thought into it. But there's a lot of people that just create crap and they throw it up there and then they sell it in a gallery. They try to get into galleries and stuff. And you can kind of tell when you look at someone's artwork if there's intention behind it. And the thing they would say in college, the professors would say, well, I kind of like it, but it's ill-conceived. It's ill-conceived and poorly thought out. But overall, it has I like the feel of it, but it's ill-conceived. And it takes a while to get there. And you have to make up your mind and dedicate yourself to your craft to a point where you say, you know what? I want this to look like that. And this is how I'm going to get there. And these are the tools that I'm going to use to do that. If you roll out of bed and just because you can draw into cute dog pictures of puppy dogs, that's fine and that'll sell. But is there an intent behind it? Is your intent to make money? Okay. And are you selling those photographs? Does that make you an artist or does that make you a capitalist? I mean, as we all know, the general public will buy anything. There's a guy that sold $1 million worth of pet rocks. He dressed up a bunch of rocks back in the 70s or 80s, and he made $1 million by selling rocks in a box. Is he an artist? I don't think so. He's a guy that had a funny idea, and he took advantage of the general public's desperation to be entertained, and there you go. So I don't know if this will help anybody, but I know myself now. When I sit down to do anything, I'm trying to think of, okay, what is this I'm trying to create? Why do I want to create it? And how am I going to do it? Before, I would just show up in somebody's town, like I went down to Tip City to meet with Logan and decided to make a documentary. I thought it was just that easy. It was the same when I wrote songs. I figured, well, I'll just pull out the guitar and throw some chords together and throw some words with it. And I do happen to have a knack to write melodies and stuff, but my songs in the old days had no structure. Here's the irony behind it. The stuff that I wrote back in the early 1990s was more popular with people than the stuff I now write that's structured. I don't understand that. People will say, oh, I love your first CD. But I don't really like the other ones. But the first CD I made, it was professionally produced at Harvest Recording by a guy named Robert Carruthers. He played on it and he produced it. But the songs aren't structured. There's no structure. There's no intent to them. There is some intent, but it's not. They're not complete. And people like that. I don't know how to go back to doing that. But the point is that I feel, I don't know about the rest of you, but I feel I am an artist now because I have intent. I know what I'm doing. I know how to get there. Do I always get to where I want to go? No, I don't always. I got a painting over here I did of the Beatles. And it was one of those things where I got into it and I just kind of like, okay, I'm just not into it anymore. And I finished it, I tossed it off and I just sit there and look at it. And my friend Rusty saw it and she's like, oh, I really like that. And like, okay. I mean, I know some people like it, and there was a lot of intent behind the painting, though. I wanted to have the colors represent each Beatle, different colors for each Beatle, and I had a whole concept behind it, but it just got to be, I couldn't stand looking at their faces, and I didn't want to take the time to paint their faces so they looked real, and it was like, everybody's going to look at that and go, that doesn't look like Paul, that looks more like a dog eating salad, People, my wife saw that, who are those guys? And I was like, oh shit, this doesn't look like the Beatles, but she's not a Beatles fan. She knows the Beatles, but she's not a Beatles fan. And now everything I do has intent behind it. I've got a new documentary I'm working on with my friend Rusty Harden. And if you don't know about Rusty, look her up. She's got a website called A Brush with Rusty. She's a well-known and well-respected artist in the Dayton, Ohio, and Tip City, Ohio area. A wonderful person, sincere, straightforward, honest, sensitive, a passionate artist who's lived her life to become an artist, and she overcame overwhelming odds to get where she got today. I'm making a documentary about her, and we had like a pre-production meeting, which I'd never heard of a pre-production meeting before until I started watching YouTube, and I went, oh, you have pre-production meetings for documentaries? You don't show up in somebody's living room and say, hey, let's talk about your why you like to collect gerbils that wear top hats, I had no idea you're supposed to do that. I said, it makes sense because then it'll cut down on costs, it'll cut down on mistakes, it'll help guide the story, it'll help structure everything. So I sat down with her and we said, we're going to tell her story of how she became an artist. And we had a couple-hour discussion about, what do we want to talk about? What is your story? And before I didn't do that. I showed up at my friend Logan's living room with his mother, and I'm like, hey, let's talk about your life as an artist. At the time I was a 54-year-old man, 53-year-old man. I figured I had it all figured out, just like with songwriting. But it really had no intent. It had a certain generalized intention to it, but I didn't have any structure to it. I don't think I could become an artist until I have actual intent and structure behind what I'm doing. Now, maybe many of you have discovered that already. But I think in order to have a true grasp of the medium you work in, you really have to know your craft and have intention behind it. So what I mean by that is you know your tools. So if you're a painter, like I said, you know what colors you pick a color scheme you want to use. You might see a photograph of something you want to make a painting of, and the color scheme there is one thing, but maybe you change it like I did to red, blue, and green. And you have an intention behind it because it creates more balance. It creates more visual excitement. You know, her maroon dress just blended in with the background that was already like a faded maroon. It didn't really stand. It's a nice photograph, but as a painting, it would just look bland. So I wanted to break it up a bit. When you write a song, do you want to have it verse, chorus, verse? Or do you want to have it verse, chorus? You know, is there a reason behind breaking up verse, chorus? Do the verses together sound boring? Or do you want to break it up with a verse and then a chorus because putting two verses together is too mundane? Do you want to make it a slow song or a fast song? Do you start it with a slow song and then you decide to change the tempo? That's all intention behind it, because you in your ear, you hear, okay, this would sound better if it was an upbeat song. This would sound better if it was a slow song. Same with writing. It's the same with everything. And I think that's when you go, oh, wow, I figured it out. I'm an artist, because you have intention, you have a structure, you have an idea behind what you want to do. It's the same thing with music. When I sit down and I used to learn songs, cover tunes, I had been playing the song Blackbird for years. I thought I had learned it perfectly. And I've been playing it one way all the time. This guy sat down and said, that's not the way Blackbird goes on the chorus. I went, what? Oh, sure it is. He goes, no, it's like this. I went, what? Oh, shit, I've been playing it wrong for like 20 years. I've been playing it completely wrong. And so I sat down with YouTube. This is like when YouTube first started. And I went, oh, wow, that's how you play that part in the chorus. Same thing with Day Tripper. I used to play Day Tripper one way. And then this guy, James, I was telling you about, he said, no, you're playing it wrong. You're one note off. I went, you're kidding, right? He was like, no, listen to the recording. I went, oh, he's right. I was off by one note. I was playing it more I was just playing it wrong. It's not important here. So from that point forward, it took years for me to get to this point, but I started to sit down and meticulously try to figure out cover tunes, especially James Taylor. I sat down and said, okay, what do I want to do here? I want to try to play, Country Road or Fire and Rain, You've Got a Friend, or You Can Close Your Eyes Now, exactly the way he's playing it on the guitar. I had an intention because I wanted to play it just like it was, or as close to what he was doing on the record. And I thought I had done that before, but I really hadn't. I just kind of one-offed it. I went out and played in coffee shops. So now I have an intention behind my cover tunes. I try to make sure that the phrasing of what I'm singing is close to what the original artist is doing, or if I'm embellishing or changing it, I put intention behind what I'm doing, what I want to do it, how do I want to sing it? Do I want to make it a blues song? Do I want to make it more ballady? And I think that's how I feel I've become an artist, because I have an intention and an idea and a structure behind what I do. Now, there'll be debate out there, like if you do artwork and people are buying it, more power to you. I mean, I guess you're an artist. There was a woman who was across the aisle from me at an art show. I was at an art fair. I had a booth at an art fair, and across, all of us had our artwork up, our painting and our sculptures and all that stuff, our photography. Got my photography up, and across the aisle from me was a lady who had a tent, and she was selling propane tanks that had been converted into bugs. She had a propane tank that was decorated like a ladybug, and a propane tank dressed up like a bear, another one dressed up like a grasshopper. And in the weekend she was there, she sold like 100 pieces. She sold out. All of her work was gone. And all of it, I sold quite a few of my own stuff as well, but she sold everything. It was gone. Her tent was empty. Is she an artist? I guess it takes some creativity to super glue googly eyes to a propane tank and put tails and ears on them. Yeah, it takes some, and it's making her money. She's definitely cleaning up. People around these parts, everyone around here uses propane. And so I guess there's intent behind what she does, but I don't really respect art like that because to me, it's like, it's gimmick. It's a gimmicky thing. Is it art? I don't know. I don't, I lean to saying, no, it's not. For me, it's not. Not something I would buy. It's not something I'd want. It's not something I create. That doesn't make it not art, but it's just whatever. But if you're out there as an artist, think about what you're doing with your creations and how you're doing it. Think of the structure behind it and the intention behind it. And I think you'll find yourself feeling more secure in yourself as an artist and thinking of yourself as an artist, because I had a hard time identifying myself as that. Now I know I can sit down and if somebody says to me, Pete, I want you to paint a painting of my cats, I can do it. Is it a Picasso or is it a Da Vinci or Renoir or Monet? No, but it's pretty good. A guy contacted me on the internet and he had me paint a painting of his 2 cats. I did a damn good job and he paid me a good sum of money for it. And it was great. But I couldn't have done it a couple of years ago. Like, oh shit, I don't know how to paint a painting of your cats. I guess I could try. I don't know, But I think you become an artist when you have intention. It's not when you have the fancy, the bizarre hippie outfit with the leather pants and the daisies hanging from your ears and purple hair and a nail through your eyelid. Looks cool and everything, but it doesn't make you an artist. I guess what I'm saying is focus less on fashion statements and whale parties and having a gallery or having an art studio, and focus on the intention behind your work. And I think you'll find yourself feeling more legitimate, like you're really an artist. This is what I found for myself. I could be completely wrong. Let me know what you think. If any of you artists are out there, text me, let me know what's going on, how you feel about that summation. All right, guys, I'm PT Pop. I'm signing off. Like and subscribe. All right, bye.